Okay, Peter. Now, as part of your job and a part of your catchment area, in 1997, all of a sudden there was a Prime Minister on your doorstep, Tony Blair.
Yeah.
And you managed to get some quite good access to Tony Blair. So, what was the head of Cool Britannia like?
Well, I mean, I think it was one of the kind of, it was my good fortune that my first 10 years as editor coincided with Tony Blair, who was the MP for Sedgefield in County Durham. So we already had a relationship with him, became the Prime Minister. So when you're the local paper for the Prime Minister, it gives you real kind of a little bit of extra clout, really, because the national papers look to see what the local paper is saying about the Prime Minister. And it wasn't just the fact that it was Tony Blair, but about a mile down the road from where I live is Croft Bridge. Halfway across the River Tees at a village called Croft, halfway across the bridge, on this side is County Durham and on that side is North Yorkshire. Tony Blair was the MP for Herworth-on-Tees. Sedgefield, includes the village where I live, Herworth-on-Tees. Halfway across the bridge is North Yorkshire, Richmondshire, and that was the constituency of William Hague. So we had an election where we had the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition meeting on a bridge smack bang in the middle of our circulation area. So we were in a really great position to be able to be the focus of national attention. And Tony Blair, I have to say, gave us great access. Whenever we needed something, he was very accessible. I remember not long into my editorship, and there was an invitation for regional editors to go to 10 Downing Street, and it was he just wanted to meet the local press, and I was invited down as part of that. So I think there was 60 regional editors went to 10 Downing Street, and when we went into 10 Downing Street and we signed the register to go in, and they saw who I was, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Barron, come with us." And they took me down a long corridor in 10 Downing Street. All the other editors were taken away, and I was down this corridor, shown into a room, and there was Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell sitting in front of a big open fire. And Tony Blair just said, "Look, before we go upstairs and talk to everybody else, we just wanted to have a chat with you, find out how things are back in the northeast. Is there anything you need?" And it was great. I just sat there talking to him for 20 minutes before we were taken upstairs. And then I remember he made a speech at the end of that gathering of regional editors. He made a little speech about how he felt local newspapers were really important to democracy. And I'd only been editor a few months, I was still green as grass. And without any warning, the president of the Society of Editors suddenly sort of at the end of Tony Blair's speech said, "Thank you very much for that, Prime Minister. We'd like to invite the editor of your local newspaper, the Northern Echo, to reply on behalf of the editors." Nobody had warned me about this. So, 3 months into my editorship, I was making this speech off the top of my head in front of not only the Prime Minister, but the entire cabinet, 60 regional editors. All I remember about that was John Prescott, Tony Blair's deputy, who hated the press with a passion. And as I was trying to make this eloquent speech, all I remember is seeing John Prescott looking at me as if I was a piece of dirt, and I got through it. And ever since then, I've thought, if ever I've had to do any public speaking, I've always thought nothing can be as bad as being asked to do an impromptu speech in 10 Downing Street to the entire cabinet.
We'll get on to public speaking in a minute, but first of all, obviously I trawl the internet in my research. I want to find out if the Queen sent you the cleaning bill for the carpet at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, well, that was 2000. That was the year 2000, and again it was an invitation for regional editors, and we were invited to Buckingham Palace, and I was standing with a few different editors who I knew inside this big kind of posh room inside Buckingham Palace, and one of the Queen's equerries or whatever came over and said, "Would you like to meet the Queen?" So we said, "Yeah, that would be great, thank you." He said, "Well, I'll bring her over in 5 minutes." Now at the time, they were going round with various kind of canapes, and I was holding on to it was a beetroot and puree pea canapé, and in between us being told that the Queen was coming over and her actually getting there, I dropped this canapé on this magnificently plush pink carpet, and it just left this horrible pea green and beetroot purple stain on the carpet. And then she started walking over, and so the editor of the Swindon Advertiser, he said, quick, scoff it. So I had to just pick it up, stick it in my mouth, full of fluff, eat it, and then within seconds I was chatting to the Queen.
And she didn't mention the carpet.
She never mentioned the carpet, no. I tell you, there was another story about the Queen, actually. I met the Queen and Prince Philip on another occasion, and it was when the Press Association was opening new offices.
Howden.
Yeah, I can't remember where it was, but anyway, we were there and we were meeting the Queen, and we were all divided up into regions. So we all had little badges on saying the North, the North East, Yorkshire, South West, or whatever. And the Queen and Prince Philip came along, and I was standing with a guy who was a lovely guy, an editor of the Grimsby Telegraph called Peter Moore. And he liked his racing as well. And when the Queen and Prince Philip came over to chat to us, there was a bit of an awkward silence. And Peter just panicked. And he said, how are your racehorses, ma'am? And she said, well, they're doing very well, thank you. And he said, well, I suppose they'll be hibernating at the moment. And she just looked at him and said, horses don't hibernate, and walked off. And ever since then, whenever we saw, Peter's passed away now, but whenever we saw him, it was horses don't hibernate. So when you meet somebody that famous, sometimes you just panic, and anything comes out of your mouth. And it did that day with Peter Moore, the long, very much missed editor of the Grimsby Telegraph.
Now, coming right up to date, you've got a family business, Barron Media. Part of that is you offer after dinner speaking, so I'm assuming you're not short of stories.
No, I've got lots of stories.
So what's apart from having the stories, what's the secret of your success briefly for after dinner speaking?
Well, I think it's like everything else. You've got to do your apprenticeship. If you're going to be a successful jockey, you've got to be an apprentice first. And I think public speaking, for me, the best apprenticeship is going out on the circuit and talking to the WIs, the townswomen's girls. So when I was editor, I was always being asked to go out and talk to these little community groups. And you find what makes people laugh. You get your list of stories that you know are going to get a good response, and you just get better at it, I think. And I did that for years. I loved doing it, because I also got great feedback about the paper from those people as well. This is the grassroots. You get an understanding of what your readers feels important, but you get your stories. And over the years, I've developed a talk which is called Cloudy Rain Later. The talk, and it's called Cloudy Rain Later because when I wrote my first words for a newspaper back on the Scunthorpe Telegraph, the first words I ever wrote were Cloudy Rain Later, which was my weather report. So I call my talk Cloudy Rain Later, and it's just a talk about life on newspapers. People love things that go wrong, so I talk about typos and things that go wrong. So the worst one we ever had, typo, I always say one letter can make the world a difference. And in 1997, I think it was, we put a little message on the front page, which was to remind people that it was the end of British summertime. And the little message on the front page was meant to say, don't forget to put your clocks back this weekend. And we missed the hell out of clocks. So you can imagine, the world goes mad. Phones are ringing off the hook, people think they're the only ones who've spotted it. But I remember after 3 hours of dealing with complaints about what we'd published, the chairwoman of the Darlington Women's Institute phoned up, and she was quite a pompous lady, and she said, have you seen what's on the front of the Northern Echo? And I found myself saying, look, madam, I'm really sorry, but it's still good advice. Now, I probably shouldn't have said that, led to a complaint. But people love fallibility, don't they? They love it when things go wrong, and there is no end of stories about things going wrong on local newspapers.
talking of stories, leading nosely on, you're also a published children's author. Is it 11 books, I think.
Yeah.
I think my 5-year-old would love them. Nosepicking Nicolas and Fartin Martin are two of the heroes of these books.
Yeah.
Why did you start writing about children?
I've got 4 kids, and so when I was when my children were little, I just started writing these stories, and they're called the Monstrous Morals, and it's about children that get into bad habits. So children have got all kinds of bad habits, whether it is breaking wind, picking the nose, not tidying the bedroom, talking in class, fidgeting in class. So there is this range of rhyming stories about children that get into bad habits, and the monstrous side of it is that they're scared out of their bad habits. And I love writing, I love words, I love rhyme. I just find it sort of something, I find it challenging but enjoyable. I love doing it. So I wrote these books, and then somebody suggested you should try and get them published. I went to a publisher, and it's really hard to get books published, but I was lucky, and they just said, we love it, we'll publish this, but we want this one first. And the one they wanted first was Fartin Martin Sidebottom, because they said that was the naughtiest,
Good old Martin. Right, we need to move on.
Yeah.
On a serious note, still with children, you're ambassador of a children's hospice and have raised some serious money.
Yeah, well, I've always felt that good news can come out of bad news. When something terrible happens, throughout my career, I've found that you can turn that into something positive. And I've lived by that all the way through my career. And the children's hospice came about when Princess Diana died in 1997. So we had that wave of emotion around the country after Diana died. At the time, the North East was the only region in England that didn't have a children's hospice. And we'd been running some stories about the Butterwick Children's Hospice at Stockton, had been trying to build a children's hospice. They'd run out of money, and they'd laid the foundations, but there was no more money to build the children's hospice. When Diana died, we said, hang on a minute, let's launch a campaign in her memory, capitalise on that wave of emotion. And huge amount of money was raised by the readers of the Northern Echo. Butterwick Children's Hospice was built. It was opened by Gary Barlow from Take That, and there it is, 20 odd years down the line, still doing an incredible job for families in the North East.
And there's just lots of things that you've done, but I want to talk about one more before we finish. Future Sport, you're a governor of, and that raises money to help young people achieve their sporting dreams.
Yeah, well, that was a Tony Blair initiative. It's not still running now. I mean, I was a trustee at the time, but when Tony Blair left as Prime Minister, he wanted to do something for grassroots sport. So he launched a foundation called Future Sport, and it was to promote sport for young people, raise money for young people to play sport. And it was just something at the time that really sort of fitted with my personal interests. I'd launched the Local Heroes section in the Northern Echo, and Tony Blair was aware of all of that. And I sat on the board of Future Sport with another member of that at the time was Tanny Gray Thompson, who lived in the northeast of England. And we just did our best to promote grassroots sport for young people.
So I was going to ask you if you've got any unfulfilled ambitions. I mean, you've done an awful lot. Is there anything that you've still got your eye on achieving?
Well, I just still love writing. I mean, I'm not the editor of the Northern Echo anymore, but I still write for the paper, have a page every week, and I try to write about positive things, people who are doing great things, put people who are doing special things in the spotlight. I'd like to write more books, really, but there isn't the time at the moment because I'm just still really busy. But I think until the day I die, I'll always be writing. I loved writing when I was at school. It was a teacher who said to me, it was actually he's just died in his 90s, a guy called Tony Robinson. When I was 12, he gave us some homework, and we had to go away and we had to write something in the style of a newspaper. And I was 12. And that weekend, it was the Arc de Triomphe, and Allez France won the Arc de Triomphe. So I wrote a story about Allez France winning the Arc de Triomphe, and the headline was Allez France romps to victory. And the teacher read it out in front of the class, said, "You should be a journalist, son." And that was it. You know, as a 12-year-old, all I ever thought about was being a journalist, writing. I just love writing, and I'll just always be writing, I think.
We do like to end an interview on a happy ending. So, Peter Barron, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.